Okay, we are live. Hi, this is William Ramsey. Welcome to William Ramsey Investigates. On today's show, I have a very special guest, a returning guest. His name is Terry Wolfe. If you're watching this on my three newly returned, well, the last 2 or 3 months returned YouTube channels, X, Rockfin, Rumble, you'll see a picture that I took from his excellent Substack. Check it out. It's at his name, Terry Wolfe. But he has written some stuff we're going to talk about today. And you see the title of this one is Why Not Enjoy the Digital ID and the Digital Gulag? Like, should we be terrified of it? Like, what's the worldview? It's interesting. He's a Christian. I've had, my last guest was Matthew Mavak from Kuala Lumpur, another Christian, wrote a great kind of 1984 Animal Farm type book about this new crazy world we're in of technocracy, digital surveillance, global trade, global movements. But I think this is part of it. Like, what's going on? A lot of interesting things are happening in Canada. A lot of interesting things are happening in the United States. But you can go back and check out the other books. They're also Christian-based books by Terry Wolfe. You can check out the interviews we've done on them. One was Rise of the Beast, Four Kingdoms Explained. We did that in August 2025. And then we did a two-part, Maybe Everyone is Wrong, Revelations, Conspiracy, and Kingdom of Heaven. We did 1 and 2, 2023. Fire in the Rabbit Hole was, I think, our first one, and Deception in the Truth Movement. There's a lot of deception in the so-called truth movement. We could probably do another show about that, because like I watched this one with Tucker Carlson and this one, yes, I was just like, why is this guy platforming? Anyway, The Paradox of Fundamentalism, God's Fault, Book 1. So check those out. I'll put links to all of his websites. What I have for him is The Winter Christian. I have his Substack at Wolfpox, P-O-X. He also seems to have a website there too. Yeah, he still has that same website, wolfpox.com. And then his books too, check them out. He can tell us where to find them. But today, again, we're going to talk about the digital ID and this kind of digital gulag based upon his research. So Terry Wolfe, welcome to the show.
Thanks, William. It's good to be back. I wanted to reach out because I respect your opinion and I want to bounce ideas off of you. I'm always quick to admit that I'm not an expert, and I like to talk to people who are smarter than me or who have conversations with thousands of interesting people and sort of have this sense of where we are. I don't talk with tons of people, but I do the research that I can. And like, as you know, I'm always interested in the prophetic angle of things, because as much as geopolitics and sort of just normal rational analysis is vital, and we have to have facts and we have to have real reporting and journalism, I contextualize all of that within a prophetic framework to try to see what it means and where it's leading. So like in Maybe Everyone is Wrong, obviously I walk through Revelation, and so I touch on all of these things in that, and I create my own interpretation and theory that uniquely actually respects the structure of Revelation and the fact that it is structured in a very, very specific way. One thing happens, and then the next thing happens, and then the next thing, all throughout. It's a linear sequence. You can't pick and choose certain things and say this comes before that. The text itself just says, and then this happened, and another seal broke, or another trumpet sounded, or whatever. It's the only prophecy in the Bible that is so structured. And so my study, like when I think about something like the mark of the beast, which is tied in with this question of the control grid and especially the financial aspect of it that everyone's worried about, I'm thinking, okay, where in the timeline of prophecy would this happen? How does it tie in with the warnings that were given about taking the mark of the beast? Because there's only a certain point in Revelation where taking the mark of the beast is explicitly said to condemn a person to an eternity of torture. So, for example, could a person take the mark of the beast, whatever that is? Let's just have an open mind about it right now. Could somebody take it sort of by accident? Everybody's a sinner before they turn to Christ. So, presumably people could take it and then change their mind and become a Christian. When does the real warning and punishment and the point of no return happen? And so if it is something as simple as biometric ID, like signing into a service with your face at an airport or a government service or a website, if because that's a strong belief in a lot of people right now, is that it is either a partial mark of the beast or it's already at that point where you need to start cutting off entire services and have nothing to do with it. And I'm trying to talk to people and get their sense of, like, I get the hype, I get the danger, I get the invasion of privacy, the centralization of data and government and Palantir and Larry Ellison and these psychos, billionaires who are collecting all the data in the surveillance state. But specifically when it comes to like Christian rhetoric, you have to be very careful once you start mentioning the mark of the beast, because it is, like I point out in my article here, how to enjoy digital ID and gulags. It's one of those things that whatever it is, whatever that mark of the beast really is, it can condemn a person to an eternity of torture according to scripture. So if you say that somebody is taking it or doing it, you're kind of saying that they're going to go to hell forever, which is not something we should do lightly. And so it has the potential to completely disrupt churches. If half the congregation does something innocuous and practical and pragmatic, and they're just sort of like, well, whatever, I used to have to use my second factor authentication by getting a text message on my phone, but now I just scan my fingerprint or something. And then, the preacher says, this is the mark of the beast, and anybody who takes it is damned to hell forever. Even if you're a Christian, because that is the logic of this, is that even a Christian who is born again and is saved by Christ, there's still this extra test now of whether you take the mark of the beast. And so for me, it doesn't get more serious than the mark of the beast and figuring out what it is. And I wrote a article that you have there on the screen, Undo the Mark of the Beast Brainwashing, July of last year, where I just kind of go through how I think people have been misled and mistaken about the mark of the beast. And a lot of Christian authors and a lot of well-meaning people, I've gone to prophecy conferences and listened to them. They're knowledgeable and they're trying to warn about a new world order, control grid, surveillance state kind of thing. And so I think they just find it invigorating and sort of like it's a good selling point to warn people about, like, hey, by the way, this is the mark of the beast, so don't take it. And to me, that's a gross leap of a conclusion and dangerous rhetoric, because we can all picture, and I was talking with somebody recently. I don't know if you know who Hervoy March is. I'm guessing.
Of course, he's the one who introduced me to you.
That's right. I remember that now.
It's been a while. I was just chatting with him online yesterday. So
I was talking with him about this, and I mentioned this example of like some old church lady who signs up for all this stuff just because it's convenient, and she doesn't follow conspiracy theory, podcasts and YouTubes and stuff like that. So she just signs up for it, and she doesn't know any better. But she's still the same exact person she was for 60 years, being in church and serving God. But now you're going to say that she's taking the mark of the beast and she has endangered her soul. It doesn't make sense. It wouldn't be just for God to have this line in the sand that's almost invisible, that if you cross that line, now suddenly you're going to hell. And he actually gave me an example. Hervoy March gave me an example of somebody he knew who fit that description like perfectly, and was doing biometric sign-in at different stuff, and was recommending it to other people because it was convenient and all this kind of stuff. And then I'm like, okay, well then Now we're already at that point, and I know because I enjoy Substack a lot. Substack, because of the Australian and UK laws about this stuff, it's not theoretical anymore. People are having to sign in with some sort of digital ID in order to access certain content, in order to be a paid subscriber, in order to post certain content, whatever. And so I don't know. What do you think in terms of what you've seen and what people are talking about? Is it even a conversation? Because I see it a lot, maybe just because of the circles that I travel in. I see people being worried about this line in the sand. When does it become the mark of the beast? Right. Is it only specifically once it is required for every single transaction? Because the Bible says, you can't buy or sell unless you have it. Is there when
is there a really firm starting point where the mark of the beast is there? Is that what you're saying? It's interesting. It's a good question. And it's interesting that this picture is featured right here, because this is, for people who are watching this is the original barcode. And the original paranoid conspiracy theory, whether right or wrong, is the barcodes. If you know the barcode, they're basically numbers, but allocated into horizontal lines, and the depth of each line is a number. But if the original barcode, and actually check this out, and it played out, is that it was bookended by a 6, ended by a 6, with a 6 in the middle. And a lot of people back even pre-internet days, this was kind of like, the real original conspiracy theories is that the barcode was already the mark of the beast. And that was the original paranoia, because it was placed on everything. To this day, it's still there. So whether this mark of the beast is some kind of literal practical thing, like it's going to be on your head or hand, and the beast system is it's like coming into view, like this dark age, this new world order, just like George W. Bush said in his speech. Like, it's coming into view, and it's part of the Masonic thing, stone after stone, right? So they're building this thing for us. And it's not godly. It's based Masonry, which is Luciferianism. And so, to answer your question, is I don't know, but it sure seems like that a lot of that stuff is happening. Like, there's more and more. They want to digitize everything. Cash is not approved as much, even in the U.S.
Yep.
So I would say that it's and these people are very dark. Most of those people who are these tech gods, these oligarchs, are not Christians. They either have some kind of like Luciferian view or view of humanity. But also, for people who don't know, is that Crowley had his own mark of the beast. I can bring it up. But he actually used something, like he perverted the book of Revelation and created his mark of the beast, which was based upon a lot of lunar, solar symbolism. And it's very graphic if you know what it means. I mean, but he would actually mark his women with that, with his mark of the beast. So maybe something very dark like that. And it kind of, and this, like, this is just talk freewheeling off the top of my head. But a lot of these people who are on this kind of more occult journey, they love tattoos and things like that. So you see a lot of tattooing and
a lot of marking. Yeah, that would be kind of like a mark of the beast, right?
Right. So maybe that is it. And I know there's some very dark secret society stuff. I've talked on other shows, the Black Dragon tattoo, which is a really dark secret society nobody knows about. But that's how they mark themselves and identify themselves to each other. Is that it's almost like the occulted knowledge, where the occultists can finish each other's sentences, much like Christians can, because we've all kind of read generally from the same books, hopefully drank from the same well, the well of Jesus Christ, the Messiah. But these other people who are not on that road, they know, like, symbols make, they see these symbols. Like, that's how I kind of found out about Crowley, is I kept seeing 93 on people's shirts or jackets or things like that. I'm like, why is this? I was literally in Las Vegas. I'm like, why does this guy have a huge 93 on his shirt? And it wasn't in context of like a sports jersey,
right?
It was something else. And so I was like, what's that number mean? And that's kind of what led to my first book. So anyway, long answer. I don't know. I wish I could give you, like, I'm not, I haven't been given prophecy to know exactly the time and place of certain things, but I do know from the Bible that you're supposed to have your lantern and keep it lit and keep watching. So maybe the most important thing is keep asking those questions and keep an eye out.
And I think that's excellent. I can see in the comments that people are leaving that there's different, theories people have about some sort of injected nanotech. That's a big one. People are worried about. There's this idea of the Neuralink, something that would literally be implanted. And this year, I think Elon Musk's Neuralink has just announced they want to start mass producing the brain chips, and they want to start having an automated process for implanting it in people. I've heard other good reporting that suggests, now I can't verify it, but it suggests that the ICE detention facilities are being set up in such a way that they can disappear people and experiment on them for Neuralink, and that there's Neuralink testing centers right next to ICE detention centers on various in Hawaii or wherever it was in some places, because these people, these are federal institutions. But if they make a state level thing, there's no regulations. So there's no tracking of where the people are. And there's this kind of idea that what Trump is doing is under the pretense of, immigration raids, is actually rounding up a bunch of test subjects for various DARPA projects, because Elon Musk is not a real inventor of anything. He's just a front man for DARPA projects. And so
is Zuckerberg too, right? LifeLog was DARPA. So all these things are DARPA, and so was COVID. DARPA came out of DARPA, the DARPA juice.
Yeah, I read a whole book on DARPA just recently, and it was very sanitized and very like talking to the DARPA people themselves as if they're going to admit, what's going on. But
I did a DARPA show with Loomis. It was one of my only shows that was literally taken off of YouTube and never allowed to be published again. So they actually deleted it, self-deleted it. They didn't say it was a copyright violation. They said, this is not acceptable. That's when you're over the target, is when they just DARPA is everybody needs to know about DARPA. So,
yeah. And so
tell and all that stuff. Yeah.
Right. And like you said, people had thought that it was just the barcode, and I talk about that in my article too, is that there's been all these iterations of what people have thought that it was in the past. And I grew up hearing about how it was either the barcodes or would be the a microchip that they'd put under your skin. And when I did my study of Revelation, I didn't see that adding up. The main thing that I found a problem with is that all of Revelation 13 that talks about the beast, and it culminates in this mark of the beast, that chapter is about empires and about nation states and the idea of a global control political system. And if people aren't thinking about what the beast even is, because we talk about the mark of the beast, but we don't really question what the beast is. And a lot of people just assume it's the Antichrist, which I think is a very weak explanation. It doesn't account for all the interesting things that is in that chapter. And so the more I was looking at it, the more I admit, I also don't have revelations from God. I just analyze this stuff and try to use logic, but that this is talking about the Roman Empire, which is what we talked about, the rise of the beast, and how you can connect the prophecies of Daniel. Daniel has these 4 kingdoms that are compared to beasts: the lion, the leopard, the bear, and then this 4th one that is an abomination with all these different heads and horns. And then in Revelation, you have the beast with the same number of heads and horns, basically matching the exact description from Daniel's 4th beast, which is clearly the Roman Empire. And so then, if Revelation 13 is picking up from Daniel, which everybody who studies it agrees that it is, then we're talking about the Roman Empire evolving into this thing. It's not a person. It's not the Antichrist. It's this system, the Roman Empire system. And how that evolves, there's the beast, the first beast. It gets wounded and then it gets revived because Satan gives it his throne. The second beast is different. It's actually, it has two horns like a lamb, and it speaks like the first beast. It gives glory to the first beast. Okay, so if we just unmask the symbolism there and we say the first beast is the Roman Empire, then what would be this second thing that comes by and glorifies the first thing while having two horns like a lamb? And we know that the lamb represents Jesus Christ, but it is satanic. It speaks satanically. It has the mouth of a dragon in Revelation 13. And it can do these different miracles and control things spiritually. So in Revelation, in Maybe Everyone Is Wrong, I walk through how I believe that that is the Roman churches, the two horns being the Eastern and Western Roman churches, the Orthodox and the Latin, the Vatican. And it was constantly, essentially, bringing people to, I mean, look at Charlemagne and look at the Holy Roman Empire and stuff. Like you couldn't even be a king if they didn't anoint you as basically with these Roman rituals, and people would name themselves like the Holy Roman Empire. Like, why would, it's a European empire by like a Germanic king, but he has to call it the Holy Roman Empire.
Right. And people have
So,
said, they've criticized it as neither holy, neither Roman nor an empire. So, but that's at least how they presented it. So.
But this is sort of the strange way that history is played out, is that everything keeps hearkening back to Rome. And then prophetically, if you look at Revelation 13 as that, it all starts to lock into place, that you have, and we talked about last time, the neoclassical architecture of all the democracies and the republics, and how all the Capitol buildings look like old Roman temples. And we have senators, just like Rome had a senator. They had a constitution. They had elections. Our whole system is designed to model ancient Greco-Roman society. And people still talk about how we always need to go back to sort of the first principles of this old Roman law and Roman imperialist strength, and like the rhetoric is all the same as well. So
it's coming back around again, like the imperial things. Like it always happens in this kind of flow of destabilization. So to get stability and order, it's like, what are we going to do in the past? Well, we're not going to go the Nazi route. Let's do Rome, Maybe people can forget all the crimes and stuff like that, or whatever. I don't know.
Although ironically, what was the Third Reich? It was trying to be Rome.
Right. I mean, those are Roman salutes, right? Those are like, it's just like a new Rome. Sorry to interrupt, but here's what Crowley's Mark of the Beast looks like. It's basically a solar phallic kind of thing. But this is what he I don't think he had the 666, but it's basically a bunch of planetary signs and then the 7 starred insignia. And then I know that you're interested, we're talking about the Catholic Church. So let's do St. Peter's Square. I'll get a bunch of hate mail for this one, but I don't care. Note the theme here, guys. This is supposedly the holiest place in the Roman thing. This is a solar phallic design, guys. And there's overlapping, and you can make a lot of excuses like, Rome has taken over the pagans or something like that some people have made this excuse for this design. Yeah, it's still extant. And that big phallus right there in the center, that monolith, it's what's it called? It was brought from Egypt by Caligula. It's literally like a symbol from Caligula, like one of the most depraved, degenerate murderer, every vice imaginable is literally sitting in front of St. Peter's Square. It's really sick. An obelisk. That's the word I was trying to figure out. Obelisk.
You've obviously got the Washington Monument, mirroring
that. Go to Buenos Aires. There are, or go to Cleopatra's Needle. They're almost in every major city. You have an obelisk, and it's all because of the secret society influence.
So if I can, if I just look at Revelation 13, it's describing this beast that evolves, and it keeps hearkening back to Rome, and it wants to control the whole world. if we accept any part of that as already having been fulfilled, and that is true, that in God's, because it doesn't matter what we think about it. We're trying to understand what God thinks about it. That's the point of prophecy, is you don't have it right unless you have it from a perspective where you're respecting why God would care about this. And so the idea of Rome conquering and then becoming a spiritual empire through the Catholic Church, what happens with the Renaissance, which literally means revival or rebirth? It's the rebirth of Rome, and it creates this constitutional republic system that everybody has to model, and they start overthrowing governments, bloody revolutions. They kill the Christian monarchs, the Protestants, and they start instituting these liberal democracies. And I don't care about politics at all. So I'm not even saying that constitutional Christian monarchy is good, or who cares? I mean, we just live in the world, and it's going to keep getting worse. That was not some sort of ideal state, but this is just how the beast operates, is that it conquers and it destroys, and then it models things after itself. And that is how the conquest works. So then if you look at the image of the beast in Revelation 13, the image of the beast is the final figuration of this that we see in Revelation 13. And it says in Revelation 13:16, and the second beast, which would be this Catholic, Orthodox spiritual system that is underpinning a lot of modern politics, through secret societies. I fully believe that the secret societies that like Freemasons and Illuminati, all that kind of stuff, ultimately is Jesuit engineering. And the Jesuits have this whole history with their origin being basically from Spanish converso Jews that were being forced in Spain to convert to Catholicism. And they did, in a sense, but they were kind of neither here nor there. They didn't feel at home either way. And so they had these secret societies where they would talk about big ideas, and they would talk freely in secret about spirituality and mysticism and secret knowledge and all these things that had been forbidden under Catholicism and under Jewish law. But now they were sort of in no man's land spiritually, but very smart and with a lot of new material because of the age of sail and discovery. And people always forget about New Spain and the fact that America was largely Spanish for hundreds of years. And the Jesuits were there, and they were figuring out, all sorts of interesting things there. So
they're the model for a lot of secret societies, guys. The Jesuits, and some of that secret information in the initiations comes out of the Jesuits. The hand signs goes into Masonry. The SS modeled themselves on the Jesuits, so they were still influential, like so many Jesuit schools in the United States alone. So
yeah,
really
and I believe the Jesuits were sort of a necessary adaptation that they made, but that fundamentally the bulk of whoever that group was, the Los Alumbrados, as they called themselves in Spain. Los Alumbrados means the illuminated. It's the same thing as the Illuminati. And you can look at the Inquisition records, and Ignatius Loyola, the founder of the Jesuits, was repeatedly investigated as being a member of Los Alumbrados. And it was largely it's exactly the kind of stuff you look into. I mean, it's this feminine, mystic led cult of ecstatic states and inducing alternative consciousness and trying to combine Jewish Kabbalah in there in order to contact angels. And, but it was done in this sort of way that was pretending to be Catholic. And that's how they kind of evaded the Inquisition, is by always saying that it was the Holy Spirit that they were talking to. And they believed that if you were in this enlightened state, if you were illuminated, alumbrados, if you became illuminated, you couldn't commit sin anymore, no matter what you did. And so they could do the most depraved, satanic black masses and, ritual sexual abuse and human sacrifice or whatever, and they would say that's the Holy Spirit doing it, not me. So everything God does is good, so it's not a sin when I do it. Like this is the kind of satanic depravity they would get into. So I believe the majority of that group just kind of went underground and spread out to America through the New Spain or the rest of Europe. And the Jesuits were sort of this group that converted to an actual institution that could then go out as missionaries under disguise and plant seminaries and schools all over the world and be a spy agency and be basically the prototype for all the spy agencies we still have. Centralized everything. All the letters had to get sent to Rome. Rome would then basically authorize projects in distant lands, and then the Jesuits would go and set up colonies in different places and essentially enslave the local population under this religious guise. And they ended up making so much money that they were pissing off the European kings, because they wouldn't pay any taxes, because they said they were just this religious order. And anyway, they ended up getting banished and suppressed. And it was right at the suppression of the Jesuits that I think it was 1773 or something like that. It's like immediately you have this explosion of revolutions across America and Napoleon, and you have all these crazy movements that come up, and Napoleon goes and unseats the Pope and desecrates the Vatican, and he just seems to have this perfect knowledge of what's happening around Europe at all times. It's like the idea that Napoleon was a Jesuit puppet is something I fully subscribe to. But the point is that if this is how the image of the beast operates, as a secret society that is recreating classic Roman democratic republic system, then the question of what the mark of the beast is needs to change from just some technology that pops out of nowhere and isn't connected to any of that, to how does this integrate into this very interesting story of the Roman Empire evolving. And what this is going to, one of the reasons I wanted to talk to you and to talk to other people that I respect about this is because people are focusing so much on this technology, but I think in a much more reasonable sense, the mark of the beast is supposed to be something that goes into your right hand or your forehead. And throughout the Bible, that is used as a completely spiritual, figurative language, like being marked, even not just the right hand of the forehead, but being marked in your right hand in the forehead is a symbolic statement about your loyalty, that you are loyal in your right hand, which universally people were considered to be right-handed. If you're left-handed, you were considered to be a freak. And
still extant in certain parts of the world. Left-handed is associated with left-hand path and witchcraft.
Absolutely. And so the idea of your right dominant hand being dedicated to a certain thing, or your forehead, which is the center of your thoughts and your mentality, being dedicated to a certain thing, that's not like, we should not, it's kind of a childish understanding to be like there's going to be a physical microchip, or like maybe it could get to that point. It'd be funny if it did, because it would be like so blatant at that point. But according to at least the biblical logic, we should be expecting this to be more of a loyalty test. And so if your actions or your thoughts are, I'm just going to say this because I need to get people's feedback on it. I literally think that the Pledge of Allegiance is more of a mark of the beast than technology, than digital ID. You're literally pledging. A pledge is where you give something up as an offering in order to, show your loyalty. It's a type of sacrifice. And if you're saying I'm going to pledge my own allegiance as a Christian, especially, although this would apply to non-Christians, it apply to everybody. The idea that you're like, why would you do that? You're supposed to be loyal to God. You're not supposed to be. We're never called to be nationalist or be aligned with a nation state. And if America or this whole Romanized liberal democracy, but if you look at the Eastern and Western Rome sort of dichotomy that we have, where you have all these Orthodox countries, the former Soviet Union states, and all the stuff that the Orthodox Church controls, which is just a different paint job than the Catholic nations, you have most of the world under the control of this Roman church system. And these people are all pledging their allegiances to these nation states that are controlled by the beast. I don't know. It seems to me, I know I don't want to say people shouldn't be patriotic, but it's a literal pledge that somebody takes.
Right. So doesn't it say in the Bible who takes the mark of the beast? So it's not like it's just there, like we're dealing with it because the barcode's there. Like we haven't made some official loyalty oath, like in the like Nazi Germany, you had to make an loyalty oath to Hitler, some kind of oath and all that stuff. So maybe that's like the depth. One of the interesting things is you can still see the right hand and the forehead in modern Judaism because the tefillin is your loyalty to the Old Testament, supposedly. Some of these Jews are not loyal, but they do it, and they're supposed to have this little Saturn box on their forehead.
They mangle the interpretation by making it a physical thing. It's clearly, the Bible does say it's supposed to be on your right hand and in your forehead, and they just literally strap it onto themselves.
Right.
But
and that's what Christ's whole thing was, is like, you guys wash the outside of the box, but not inwardly. We're not. And so that's one of his general Christian themes, is be suspect of all of the external artifices of Christianity, because they can become symbols and outside of the actual practice of the way of Christianity, in my opinion. So that's why I like it. Yeah. And Christ was, when he got in front of the Pharisees and the scribes, he just like insulted all their clothes and the way they walked around and their interest in money,
their public praying, that they were so outwardly religious.
Religiosity is a good way. Catholic Church is really good at religiosity. I grew up in the Catholic Church, so I know. Like when I read the Bible, I was like, "What are you guys doing? What are you guys doing?" That's why I'm 57. Like they never say in a Catholic Church, they never go into that part of the Bible where Christ upbraids the scribes and Pharisees. I've never heard.
Really?
They avoid it. It's almost like well, we don't want to ever talk. This is the bad side of Christ. He's very angry. So we don't want to go into that. But because I think, my opinion, it's self-condemnatory. They would be like, oh, we act like scribes. We're telling you what we think the Bible is. We're the intermediaries, much like, in my opinion, what the Pharisees and the scribes were back in the day. They would rewrite the Bible. Like if they didn't agree with something, we'll just take it out. Like, what the heck is going on?
Right. So the Pharisees created what they called a hedge around the law, which is that there was the actual law of Moses, and then they would create what they called a hedge around it, so that if you went according to the Pharisees' traditions that they just completely made up on their own.
Yeah, that's the oral tradition.
That's
the whole thing. There's still battles
Talmud,
within, right? There's still battles within Judaism today. Some of the same battles that took place 2,000 years ago. And some of those people who are in political power today, people, are the same people Christ and the apostles fought against. They're the same type of ideology. It's not that much different. These are different labels. It's 2 millennia ago. No. It's the same issue. You make up rules for yourself. You write it all. You're not even, and even Stephen, before he was martyred, said the same thing in his testimonies. Like, you guys are just making this up. We've said the same thing over to you over and over again, And it's like they just never, and it's still the same Jews today. So sorry.
I mean, even official Jewish scholars, they don't deny at all that the Pharisees directly evolve into the rabbinic system after the temple is destroyed and after Rome destroys Jerusalem. They get scattered, the diaspora, and they just create the rabbinic system, and they basically systematically eliminate and get rid of any of the legacy of the Sadducees, who were the official priesthood of Jerusalem. They hated that there was a bloodline of actual priests, which, not that the Sadducees were great either. Jesus criticized them as well, but they were at least the real priesthood. The Pharisees were just a made up, traitorous, scheming group that formed out of this desire for education. And so they claimed to be educating everybody when in fact they were just making up stuff because they didn't understand it themselves and they wanted more control. And so the rabbi system comes out, they create the Talmud, and then the Talmud is this dialectical, have it both ways, talking out of both sides of your mouth, crazy book, or library of books, actually.
It's enormous. It's like 36 books. It's like incredible amount of writing.
And then there's the Babylonian one and the Jerusalem Talmud, which I don't really understand the difference between those. But, there was a lot of Jews that stayed behind in Babylon and didn't go to Jerusalem when the Jews were liberated under the Persians to be able to go and rebuild.
600 BC, 6 or 500 BC, something like that.
Yeah. And so the idea of, this is actually what I was talking with Hervoy March about mainly, was the idea of future Israel today being fulfilling the Whore of Babylon prophecy in Revelation, and how many different ways Jerusalem gets identified as Babylon, and the parallels there, but that's a separate topic. But yes, this idea of symbolism, symbols have this weird way of containing knowledge, but being very easy to pervert and corrupt because they're not explicit, they're suggestive. And so then you can have dual, triple, whatever, however many meanings you want in one symbol. And so a lot of the rituals that you have in the Catholic Church and in different places, they can look, let's just think you're talking about that monument in Peter Square.
Right. Yeah, well, it's actually you can look it up. It's the obelisk of the, what do you call it? One of the Roman emperors. So,
and they're very proud of the fact that
Little Boot, whatever his name is.
It's like St. Augustine goes and writes about how basically we're going to go and, reshape the world with Christianity. And he's like, was he before or after Constantine? He was after him, right?
I think so.
And so he's basically justifying this idea of like a Christian imperial thing that is going to reform people, and Catholicism goes around and sort of meets everybody halfway. Like they basically adapt Christianity to appease whatever group they're going into. So then you have all these half Christian, half pagan situations, and they're proud of the fact that they got this heathen or pagan culture to start worshiping Jesus. But it's like, oh, you can still basically keep your holiday. We'll just say that it's about Peter or something, or we'll just take your God and we'll make it a saint in ours, or whatever. Like,
it's the same thing to this day. Christmas and so many of these things aren't based upon the Christian calendar.
And if you think of, and the reason I even focus on that at all is just because if you're trying to understand why the beast is so offensive to God, it is because God wants purity basically more than anything. That was the whole idea of holiness in the Old Testament already, is the idea of separation. That's why the temple at the tabernacle had these gates that you couldn't get into the next gate unless you were qualified for it. So there was an outer gate for like Gentiles, and then inside that there was a section just for women, and then there's another section for just the men, and then there's like another section for the priests, and then there's like the Holy of Holies that only the high priest could go into at like one time per year or whatever it was. And there's this idea of layers of separation, and that's what holiness means. It's why it's the holy of holies, is nobody can go in there. And so,
and it's counterbalanced by beast, which is repeated over and over in the Old Testament and the New Testament. A lot of these people are with the beasts in the field. Nebuchadnezzar shoved with the beasts of the field. That's part of his punishment.
yeah,
you can see that theme, and it goes all the way to the book of Revelation.
the beast being an unclean and sort of vulgar thing that is just sort of part of the world and is not separated. And so the idea of this giant beast that mingles everything together, the syncretic, as it's the proper term for a syncretism, this idea that you merge religions together, is almost it is in a way the most satanic of all. To take something holy and mix it with the unholy is why all the black masses and all the dark rituals and stuff, they always try to take the holiest thing they can and then pervert it, because that is much more offensive than just doing the evil thing on its own and rejecting all the good things. If you can take something good and subvert it, that's more powerful.
Exactly.
And the mark of the beast being this loyalty to this system that mixes everything together. I'm not saying it is the Pledge of Allegiance. I'm using that as an example of how something could fulfill this pretty easily without having any technology. And then people will ask, what about the buying and selling? I thought the whole point was you can't buy or sell if you don't have the mark of the beast, because it says, I'll just quote it, the second beast required all people, small and great, rich and poor, free and slave, to receive a mark in their right hand or in their forehead, so that no one could buy or sell unless he had the mark, the name of the beast, or the number of its name. So and then it goes on to say, here is wisdom. Let the one who has insight calculate the number of the beast, for it is the number of man. And that number is 666. And so obviously you have numerology, people going crazy over 666 as a code for all sorts of things. I don't particularly subscribe to that. My theory, I think I told it to you last time, has to do with it being the number of man, that it has to do with humanism and man being made on the sixth day and rejecting God and having an atheist worldview. 7, the number of completion, when God rests and everybody glorifies God for the fact that he created everything in 6 days. 6 is like humanity gets created. We're just going to have humanity. We're not going to stop and glorify God. And there's a whole logic for why throughout the Revelation you have a conspicuous amount of times that the angels are warning the world and warning people to glorify God and to not deny that he is the creator of everything. And it's kind of weird because it's only quite recently, historically speaking, that anybody denied that there was a God. Like, atheism is a completely new invention, basically in the 1500s with humanism and this idea that God doesn't matter. We're going to have a human judgment for everything. Humans, I forget what the name of the Greek philosopher was, but Protagoras or whatever his name was. Anyway,
Pythagoras?
I think it was where we get the word protagonist from. So I think it might be Protagoras. But anyway, he said like man is the measure of all things or something. And the Renaissance, because they had this huge influx of Greek texts and all the intellectuals started to read these old Greek philosophers, they read that and it started to circulate that this idea of let's be more like the Greeks. This is why the Renaissance happens, is all this Greek text comes in and influences the elites of Europe in the 1500s, thus reviving the beast, reviving this Greco-Roman system. And they create humanism, which is this philosophy that still is dominant today, that God should not be part of the conversation. everyone acts in their own interests, and we create our own standards for everything. We don't need the Bible. We don't need God's influence. And then, of course, the Catholic Church and the beast system having that in its back pocket, where if you do want to turn to God, they want you to turn to that version of God. So there's a fallback, that even if you try to be a Christian, they're going to try to deceive you. But is it Protagoras?
I think so. Yeah, I think that you got it right.
So anyway, this idea of the mark of the beast could be fulfilled, and I want people to think about that it could be fulfilled without any technology. And the buying and selling aspect, the reason why it affects the rich and the great, the small and the poor, the slaves, the free men, and all of that, would be more about the ability to do trade, especially as a nation. And so I know it says all people. Okay, it does say all people, but we are talking about a system that is an international finance system, international banking. What countries are sanctioned, tariffed, and not allowed to do trade? Their trade routes are blocked. Anybody who does business with them are cut off, and you basically are starved and isolated. It's China, it's Iran, it's, these different countries that have not submitted to the beast. These are rich or small, great and poor countries. There's a huge variety of countries. I mean, by now it's almost completely consolidated. There's almost no one left that doesn't submit to this International Monetary Fund global banking system. But essentially, that is the method by which the image of the beast has conquered the world, is through banking, finance, debt, and this idea of whether you can buy or sell. Because in order to succeed as a nation, it's always been true from the beginning of history, you need to be able to trade your goods, or else you're just kind of going to be very primitive and stuck, and you're not going to have any success. I believe this is not going to culminate in prophetic terms in an actual personal mark of the beast that somebody has to take in order to buy or sell, but the pressure is always in that direction, that in order to prosper, and I would even say, look at the dissidents, the whistleblowers, the journalists who speak out against things. Suddenly your bank accounts can get frozen. You can be basically blacklisted unofficially from all sorts of, certainly in Hollywood, and if an actor ever is found out to be a Christian or to criticize the system and stuff like that, suddenly they can't get work. And it's not a literal, every single transaction that could ever take place requires this magical technology to be the mediator in between. It is a system of oppression whereby the more you reject the beast, this false Christian, false Greco-Roman idea of liberty, the idea that the country's a meritocracy and we vote our good representatives in and they represent us, the people, and all the lies and bullshit of the beast system that we live in, the more you expose that, the more you become financially pressured and divorced from being able to participate. If you just look at that as a fulfillment, because almost everyone would agree, everything else in Revelation 13, we're not literally looking for a beast that has 7 heads and 10 horns. Nobody expects that's going to be a literal thing that deceives the whole world. Like, if you can have a little bit of metaphor in there, the idea of this beast requiring all types of people to receive this mark, which is not a physical mark, it's a loyalty test, then we have already had the mark of the beast for 500 years. And and then the idea of digital ID is sort of the last, the thing I wanted to get
most recent iteration, right, of this whole loyalty to the world system, so to speak. Isn't that like one of the subtext or meta text of Christ's teaching is to not be of this world and like put all your coin in heaven. And so like
Yeah.
there's people who've made that mark. Like there's people who said, like, I'm of the world. I'm going to take the best things of the world.
Mm.
And I don't care about my eternal reward or what, whatever. They reject the offer of heavenly reward, so to speak. So then so there's people who've taken that oath. I mean, or said it in their own mind,
It's an excellent point, because the dichotomy is so clear with Jesus being poor and never telling his followers to value worldly wealth, worldly status. If you want to go the opposite way of Jesus, then yes, you are pursuing wealth. And then if Satan can control the method by which you get wealth, then almost by nature, in order to have that big success and wealth, you have to violate Christian principles. And so there is that dichotomy between the holy people who want to be separated from the world. You want to be more like Christ and less like the rest of the world. And those who are willing to essentially sell their soul. And Jesus even says, what would a man give for his soul? And yes, he talks about how you should put your treasures in heaven where it will never rust and where nobody can steal it and nobody can take it away. And there's all these reminders that if you get persecuted for God, for serving God, that you will get rewards in the next life. And so, ultimately, you are not to envy anybody because they're rich in this life, because that doesn't count for anything. Those people, he says that the rich will not enter heaven, or that it will be as hard as a camel going through the eye of a needle.
He also says they already have their reward. Like they're almost like not part of any of heaven's benefits or something like that. Like,
yeah,
they already have their reward, money. That's it.
I didn't even think of that. Like, that's such a good point you brought up. I was thinking of all the nuances of the prophecy, but the blatant, like, common message of the gospel is so tied in with this as well, that it speaks to the beast system being an ambitious, global, all-consuming, mingling, violating, perverting system that controls wealth and consolidates it. And the gospel and Christianity being this thing that is set apart, that Satan can never stamp out fully and can always sort of chase it around, but can't corner it, no matter how much power they have, and is always trying to lie about it and create a false version of it and lure people into that. And yeah, I that unlocks another appreciation I have for that, why God would give those kinds of warnings, why it culminates in a mark of the beast that's about controlling finances. It's not just about telling future generations like ours that watch out for this thing that's going to happen. It's so consistent with the rest. And then, you have, the whore of Babylon and being the epitome of the evil in the prophecy of Revelation. And what is it described as being? It's described as being a whore, meaning it fornicates with all these different kings. It is this woman that has no shame and is willing to do anything for riches, and it rides the beast. It rides this beast system. It gets a free ride, this parasitic relationship that it has with the beast, and it luxuriates in all of its wealth and all of its trade and all of its glory. And so even that is it's actually a consistent message throughout Revelation, that you have this contrast between those who are persecuted and staying true to the gospel, and those who are going along with the beast, like this whore of Babylon does ultimately.
Doesn't she have a goblet with the blood of the saints too? Like, it's very dark. Like,
absolutely.
dark.
And so it's this idea of this future city that is going to be completely depraved. It says she's drunk on the blood of the saints, actually. That's right. And she makes the kings of the world drunk as well with her fornication and with the blood. And so the idea of killing Christians, getting away with it, getting drunk on that you're probably familiar with the term duper's delight. This
Yes,
idea that
sure.
that you can, like, there's this sick satisfaction that deceivers get when they can trick a bunch of people and get away with a crime, and it's really hard to hide because it's such a visceral feeling within them. Imagine that on a national scale or a citywide scale of these elites who are doing this, and they can commit a genocide in broad daylight in 4K with an entire generation watching, and nothing happens to them. And then everybody who's allied with them, they're all on pins and needles. They're like, what's going to happen? Something has to happen. This has never happened before. There's been genocides before, bigger genocides in the Soviet Union and China and all that kind of stuff, but it's never been on social media before. And so it's like, and then nothing happens. There's essentially no consequences. Like, that would kind of make you drunk with madness and with power to be like, we can just start killing people. That doesn't even trigger a revolution of any kind. And so this idea of the Whore of Babylon being the pinnacle of this, the opposite, taking the mark of the beast so much, being so invested in this beast system that it denies God, it denies Christ blatantly, wants to build the third temple, so that they can have their own high priest, because Jesus is our high priest, but
he's our exemplar of the temple, right? So he passes away
he's
on the
living
cross,
temple,
and the seven, seven seals, not seven seals, but seven veils split and crossed, right? So it's almost like a revelation. And they're already, for people who don't know, they tried to rebuild the temple, I think in the 4th century BC or AD, excuse me, and it was a complete catastrophe. And the guy basically gave up, and like all these things, horrible things happened when they tried to rebuild it. So some of this stuff, watching all these political leaders prostrate themselves, ostensibly Christians, in front of this wall that really doesn't have anything to do with the original temple, right? You should probably scratch your head. Like, that's a really, very important thing. We're at the hour mark. You want to take a few questions here?
Yeah, I'd love to.
Go. Let's go. This guy, this is JC. He says, but it seems obvious by now that Bitcoin was a big tech psyop to make the tokenization of everything seem like it had anything to do with liberating. Do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I totally think Bitcoin is a psyop in a sense. It is a DARPA technology, probably. Satoshi, whatever, fake person that they credit for that. My quick take on that is essentially that the people who are in charge right now, the Trump faction, what that represents is a military deep state that is trying to accelerate the collapse of the US dollar and collapse trade relations, collapse basically all traditions, the Constitution, everything at once, kind of sort of discredit and bring down all of it as fast as possible in order to trigger emergency powers, to justify a huge military crackdown, and what has been described as this Phoenix effect, where America will rise again from its own ashes and have this basically military martial law system. This is basically the plot of Dr. Strangelove and the Nazis underground, How I Learned to Love the Bomb, the idea of wiping out humanity and starting over, and you get to repopulate it. And this Nazi, neo-Nazi movement gets to sort of take it over. And so Bitcoin is a part of that, because think of how many billions of dollars are getting funneled into nothing at all, just into this void, this black hole of nothingness that is Bitcoin. It's just the ultimate bubble. It serves no purpose. People just compare it to gold as if that's even remotely logical. And then if the dollar collapses, I mean, that wealth normally should be circulating through the economy and affecting wages and growth and investments and stuff like that. But I think Bitcoin is this sort of gamble they took to say, you'll have this investment, which when you sell your Bitcoin, you're just going to use cash again. So you're just putting it back into the cash system for more cash. So it's not really no one's going to use it for trade, and nobody even thinks that it will. And then it's this high energy consumption mining stuff. There's so many red flags around it. But yes, I think that it's got so many contradictions in it. And when you listen to Bitcoin people hype it up, they never want to address these things. It's always just, who cares? It's just, you can get rich doing it. It's like, oh, okay, that's classic bubble psyop sort of terminology that people are using.
Yeah. Another question is, from Zizix, do you have any ideas or information on resistance or disabling this kind of system?
Well, my Substack is winterchristian.substack.com, and one of the most common themes of my writing on there is, what can we even do? Let's not have false hopes and delusions of revolution at this point. I believe the concept of the winter Christian is, the winter that I'm talking about is the tribulation. It is the tribulation of Christians, especially, although there could be a wider dragnet of dissidents and people trying to do a revolution that get dragged into that. But essentially, there is a control system here that is powerful enough. You're never going to upend what we're talking about. You're never going to stop a military intelligence insider cult from, I mean, look at what they did with Maduro. And like, you think you can hide in the woods and have a box of ammunition and like go fishing and you're going to survive. There's so many ways in which I have tried to, in a way, it's a very bleak outlook because it's like, you can't resist it. I think on a personal level, you can obviously minimize things. Like, I use Linux instead of Microsoft because I believe they're spying on everything, and they're constantly trying to do unethical things. I try to use services and promote good things instead of bad things. We can all do these personal things, and there is some cumulative effect. But essentially, I always resort to the Christian logic that we're not even supposed to value our own lives that much. I mean, to be responsible, to have so I can see people using cash and whatever. In this article that I wrote, I literally used the logic of Jesus saying, "Render unto Caesar what is Caesar's." Whose inscription is on the coin? It's the Federal Reserve. I mean, this is not a good entity. Cash is not a holy good thing. It's a fiat currency that is controlled by them. If they wanted to recall all the cash and say it's not valid anymore, you would have no argument because they control it. And Jesus basically says, give unto Caesar what is Caesar's, give unto God what is God's. You have to live within the world. You don't have to endorse it. And so rather than thinking of resisting this and trying to somehow overthrow it, I think the more wise approach is to say, how much can we expose it and how much can we help people to escape from it spiritually, so that they don't get corrupted by it. And then the rest is in God's hands, what your fate is.
It's a great answer. We are at the hour and 8-minute mark. We're about 70 minutes in. Is there anything else that you'd like to add, or anything you'd like to tell people about what you're working on other than the Winter Christian?
I am writing more books. It's a little too early to try to promote them, but I would suggest people. I am now starting my podcast up again and trying to do more interviews. And so if people want to listen to episodes that I'm doing on that, I have a podcast called the Not Done Yet podcast. I'd appreciate subscribers there because I just restarted it. And my books are there on audio form. If you want to listen to for free, Maybe Everyone is Wrong, Revelation's Conspiracy in the Kingdom of Heaven, where I walk through Revelation. You don't have to pay anything. Just go listen to it chapter by chapter on the podcast. And then Fire in the Rabbit Hole is also in audio form there. And so that's for people who like this, who like podcasts and want to learn more about this. And other than that, I'm really just happy to talk to guys like you that, have experience and care about these things and are willing to, discuss controversial takes like this. So
yeah, but I mean, I think it goes back to like, let's get back to the scripture, keep your lamps lit. You know, some of these things happen. Maybe who would have thought this genocide in Gaza would have happened in our lifetime? Like literally, I think there's 750,000 people murdered, and half of them are children. And then all the wars, like we've involved in some border war in Russia. The United States is the primary activist in this, another kind of genocide, because I think the population of the Ukraine was 30 million. 2 million people are dead there from the war, and then another 10 million left. And then it's getting worse. They're not the US, foreign policy establishment or whatever, including Trump, are involved in all this stuff. So these rumors of wars and rumors of wars in Iran and Nigeria and Venezuela, these are all real. And then there's just the Greenland, it's not stopping. It's some kind of global chaos thing. So
and the thing is just that the more this happens, I'm seeing it at a ground level with just ordinary people I work with and talk to, and I see it all over social media. People are starving for an answer for what this means. In terms of geopolitics, yes, but then Christians are asking, what does it mean prophetically? And you get the Zionist versus anti-Zionist. There's a lot of completely unjustified generalization and hatred of Jews and just lumping all Jews together, even though they don't even realize that like most of Tel Aviv was protesting Benjamin Netanyahu for like 40 weeks straight in Tel Aviv. They were doing mass demonstrations against him. They just mix all this stuff together. It's a very dangerous thing to start just suddenly taking these dramatic black and white stances on it without going back to scripture and asking what's actually going on there. That's one of the reasons I feel like the more you study it, the more of a balanced view you can have. And so I'm trying to sort of recontextualize it so that there's not as much grifters and extremists coming out and taking advantage of people's outrage.
Right. So OSP says, I guess the only hope is that it says those who choose to take the mark, meaning there's a choice, but then again, that's the whole heads coming off shoulder stuff. So it seems to me that people make that choice to take that mark of the beast. And if you want to see kind of a satanic depiction of Crowley's mark of the beast ritual, you can see it at the end of a movie called The Ninth Gate. And it's really heavy duty. And the beast is Johnny Depp, good friends with Damien Eccles. So some of the stuff is very relevant. Like I've had the misfortune of reading a lot of Crowley's ritual magic stuff. But great talk. Thanks for everybody for listening. We had 120 live listeners, a lot of great comments, a lot of the guys I've seen before. So thanks to everybody for joining in. Any last words, Terry Wolfe, before we end it? Is there anything you'd like to add?
Just God bless you, and let's all keep our lamps lit and be skeptical of the false hopes that people are putting out there. The people who are doing the psyops know that we're desperate and we're anxious, and they are very keen to try to offer all these solutions and false hopes constantly. And we need to just have our hope fully in Christ and not trust anything in this world to be the solution.
Amen. Great way to end it. Again, it's Terry Wolfe. Check out his Substack, The Winter Christian. We've done 5 shows. If you missed the intro, guys, you can check those out at William Ramsey Investigates. Just find any kind of place and search thing, and it's WOLFE, Terry Wolfe. And we talked about the digital ID and the digital Gulag. We are all kind of getting deeper, more and more entrenched in. So, Terry, thanks so much for your time. Really appreciate it.
Thank you.